What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. It is April, and that means that it is NFL draft season here on the podcast, one of our favorite events every year. And Matt is coming on in just a minute to help me kick it off by answering the biggest questions of the 2023 NFL draft. We're talking quarterbacks, we're talking receivers, running backs, defensive position groups. We're going to be all over the place today. But before we get started, I want to say congratulations to the UConn Huskies men's basketball team, the national champions of college basketball. If you followed our March Madness coverage here on the podcast, you knew that UConn was only one of three teams that could possibly win the championship this year. And they took care of business, man. They made us look good. And they did it in dominant fashion. They absolutely dominated every team they played in the tournament. Part of that was because they're a great basketball team. Part of it is because the bracket broke nicely for them. Didn't have to play Kansas or UCLA in their region, end up getting Miami and San Diego State in the Final Four in the championship. I think that's going to be one of the big regrets from this tournament is not knowing if UConn really got the proper challenge that we would have liked to see them get. But there's no doubt in my mind that they're the best basketball team in college basketball this year. I think very deserving champion, and they proved it on the floor for 3 straight weeks. So congrats to them. And congrats to the Lady Tigers from LSU as well. Awesome performance against Iowa. Very fun women's national championship. So we are shifting focus now to the NFL draft. And I got Matt coming on here to help me get it kicked off. So let's go. All right, Matt is here. Matt, it's just you and me this week.
I know. I feel alone.
I know it's weird when we did this when we had Devin on for like 3 months in a row. And then all of a sudden it was just you and me. And it's like, oh, no more
Yeah.
3-man booth, but
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
okay.
I figured Clint probably needed a break anyways. We've been doing a lot of D&D craft stuff. So
Well, he will be
uh,
back, but this next 5 weeks, this is really just for you and me. This is
oh yeah.
one of our favorite things to do on the podcast. I think one of the things we do best.
Yeah,
The
no, this is our like romantic vacation getaway.
Oh, talk dirty to me. We're doing NFL draft content for the next 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. We'll see how it goes. We're going to take you guys all the way up to the draft at the end of April and then do our draft recap podcast and then maybe some NFL future stuff before we get back into the NBA playoffs. We are kicking off our draft coverage with the biggest questions for the 2023 NFL draft. Matt, I was looking at the draft class, and it's just funny to me how one draft class can be so different from the last one. Last year, we had one quarterback go in the first round, and then we didn't see another until the third round.
Yeah. This year we might have 5.
We could
I
potentially
don't
have 5.
think we will, but it's a very real possibility.
Do you subscribe to the theory that we could see between 3 and 4 be the first 3 and 4 picks of the NFL draft?
Do I believe it's possible? Yes. I don't expect it. Definitely not. I definitely don't expect 4, but I believe it's possible.
Is that like the dream scenario for Lions fans sitting at 6 to see the first 4 picks be quarterbacks?
It depends entirely on your philosophy on building this roster. Honestly, I mean, if you are sold on Jared Goff being the future of the quarterback position for this franchise, then yes. If you think that in order to be a perennial contender, there probably should be an upgrade there at some point, you want you want specifically one of those quarterbacks to be there. So
Fair. Well, let's talk about the quarterbacks because there's 4 that I feel are consensus first round picks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Bryce Young from Alabama, CJ Stroud from Ohio State, Anthony Richardson from Florida, and Will Levis from Kentucky. I think Hendon
Yeah.
Hooker is probably the one that you're thinking that he could be a first round pick, but it's going to be
Yeah.
borderline.
We're honestly even getting to a point now where consensus might even be a little bit of a stretch for Will Levis. Like if he gets past a certain point in the draft, like he's either needs someone to move up for him or he's not getting drafted in the first round. Well, we'll get into it later, but he is a very peculiar one for me to. Well, honestly, both him and Hooker are very peculiar for me to evaluate.
I feel like what we've learned about Will Levis so far is that he's just a very peculiar person in
Yes.
general. Matt's background this week is making fun of Will Levis for his fear of milk. So,
Alleged fear. It's not confirmed, I suppose.
of all the things that came out of the combine, the fact that Will Levis may be afraid of milk, I think precludes him from being a franchise quarterback. Like it's just flat stop right there.
Which, like, if you are another team in the same division as the team that drafts Will Levis, how do you not make milk like a major thing that your concession stands sell?
Like this is the
Like
thing,
you have to do that, right?
whether it's true or not, he's going to be haunted by milk chants for his entire career.
Yeah.
Like especially whenever he becomes a starting quarterback, if he does. Like I don't know, you can't play in Green Bay, can't play anywhere that like milk and cheese are popular, right? So
Which is the world.
The Midwest specifically. Uh, but we didn't really do this segment last year because the quarterback class was so weak. But you go back to 2021, the draft where there was 5 quarterbacks taken in the top 15. That
Yeah.
was like the hot thing was like, how do you rank these guys? Because there's 5 guys in the top 15. We could see 4 guys potentially in the top 10, the 4 that I mentioned before. We could throw Hooker in there for good measure if you would rather have him over one of those guys or if there's another quarterback that you like. But how do you rank at least the consensus top 4 and then maybe a 5th guy
Yeah.
if you have one you like?
My number one is not particularly exciting. It's pretty chalky. For me, it's still Bryce Young. Look, I get the size thing. I I get that we look at Kyler Murray and he's gotten banged up a lot, but also like let's look at Kyler Murray and look at why really hasn't he really taken another step? Oh, right, because he refuses to study film. So
Yeah.
I don't see that being Bryce Young.
I thought you were going to go Anthony Richardson, number 1.
Yeah,
And
I knew that's what you assumed.
now I'm realizing we're going to have the exact same fucking rankings.
Possibly, possibly.
No, I am like
I'm
99%
pretty
sure we're the
confident in it.
exact same.
Uh, but when I look at Bryce Young play, he just other than his size, like he just checks goddamn near every box. The thing that he does better than anyone else and really any draft since Joe Burrow is just come up with a play when his team needs it. And it's seemingly is always just like he finds that little extra gear, right? That thing it's like that Mahomes does. Like Mahomes is not fast. Like Mahomes ran the same 40 time as Matt Stafford. But he gets that little extra gear that makes him just fast enough. You see a lot of that with Bryce Young, although Bryce Young is definitely more athletic. Um,
Yeah, I wrote down for Bryce Young. I have Bryce Young number 1 as well.
mm-hmm.
I wrote down that he has it.
Yep.
Whatever it is, he has it. And
Yeah,
like
in
that,
spades.
yeah, it may sound like lazy analysis, but if you watch him on film, you're like, this guy has it. It just
Yeah,
whatever. And I think about the Auburn game where he was horrible the whole game
yeah,
and the offense was horrible and they were down by 4 with like 2 minutes left to an Auburn team that was a bad Auburn team, but it's a rival. So it's a big
yeah.
game for them. It's a big spot. And
Hmm.
what does he do? He leads them 97 yards or whatever it is straight down the field and throws the game winning touchdown.
Yeah,
He has that it factor, that like the pop, the
yeah.
whatever it is.
When everything else is wrong, you find that ability to just, all right, this is what's in front of me. I can hyper focus on that. And as I move through this thing, millisecond by millisecond, I can hyper focus on every little thing.
Yeah, it has that same feeling that you have if you're rooting against Mahomes. Like if you're rooting against Alabama, which I'm sure the majority of people listening to this podcast do, it's that same thing as if you're rooting against KC, where you're just like, it's coming. I know it's coming. It's just a
Yeah,
matter of when. It's like playing the Warriors when they had Kevin Durant as well. And
yeah,
like, I know neither of us are saying that Bryce Young is going to be Patrick Mahomes, but it's just that feeling of like, oh God, it's
yeah.
coming. And it you can talk about the Auburn game, the Texas
Hmm.
game, numerous other games where
Yeah.
he pulls it out at the end. It's just what he does.
There's a reason that Carolina paid a relatively hefty price to move up and presumably go get that guy. If they go get Stroud, good God.
Do you think that Bryce Young is the pick? Because I think Stroud is the favorite in
I know he's the favorite,
yeah.
but I can't. God, I hope that Stroud is not the pick for Carolina fans because I presume that they deserve better. I guess I don't really know if they deserve better, but
I feel like an NFL fan base, if you don't know that they don't deserve better, that probably means they deserve better because they haven't done anything to piss you off,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Stroud is minus 300 to be the first pick right now. Bryce Young is plus 230,
Yeah.
but we're on the same page.
It's also smoke screen season, so
Yeah, this is time
who
to
the
make
fuck
money though.
knows?
This is where you make
Yeah,
money. We're gonna do the gambling episode a couple weeks from now, but
yeah,
this is the time. Yeah, I look at his scouting report, and it's one of those things where like you look at the positives, and it's everything you want in a
yeah.
quarterback. There's good arm strength. He attacks all 3 levels of the field well. He creates something out of nothing.
Yep.
He's clutch. He's poised in the pocket. He's good pocket awareness. He's
Hmm.
got the escapability. And it's like negatives. He's small.
Yeah,
And it's the same conversation
yeah.
we had with Devonta Smith last year, where you can't just say he's small and I don't like that about him,
Right.
because his film shows that his height's not affecting him doing things like attacking the middle of the field.
Yeah,
Like you got guys like Kyler who are small and have trouble attacking the middle of the field because of their height.
right.
But you also have guys like Drew Brees who was borderline 6 feet and never had an issue
Yeah.
because of the way he played. And Bryce Young, I don't see those issues on film.
Let's be real. We're talking about a quarterback that plays for Alabama having size issues, playing behind an offensive line that like I'm willing to bet like it's probably 80% of that offensive line is going to play in the NFL at some point. So he's already playing behind an NFL sized offensive line. Okay, what are our concerns? Because he's already showing that he can do that.
I just feel like if he was 3 inches taller, we wouldn't even be talking about who the number one quarterback in this class is. Like there wouldn't even
Yeah,
be a debate. He would be, if he was like 6'2", 6'3", he would be
yeah,
minus 1,500 to be the first overall pick, and it wouldn't even be a debate.
yeah,
So I'm not letting the size deter me from getting that dude who people are calling like the Steph Curry of football, basically,
right.
or like that franchise guy on YouTube called him bite size Mahomes. I'm like, I don't know if I would go that far, but I watched the film and I understand why
Yeah.
you would have that comparison.
Yeah, I mean, I still very much think that he's going to get in the league and he's going to have his own flavor to things. I I very much believe that by the end of year two, everyone's going to be like, yeah, no, like this guy's it. Like he's got it figured out. It might take him a year because obviously like rookie year in the NFL can be rough, but by the end of year two, I think he's gonna have really put his stamp on things.
Yeah, I just look at him versus the other quarterbacks in this class. I'm like, this guy just knows how to play quarterback.
Yeah.
Again, I think about it. I know we're just throwing out every single lofty comparison there is at
Yeah.
this point, but I think about Tom Brady. And
Hmm.
the thing that made Tom Brady so great was never that he had the best arm or the best mobility or the most athleticism. It was that he knew how to read a defense, he knew how to
Yep.
manipulate a defense, and he just knew how to play quarterback the best that anyone's ever known how to play quarterback. So I look at
Yeah.
Bryce Young and I'm like, okay, he's not as big as some of the other guys. He doesn't have the rocket arm. I mean, he has a good arm. I'm not
Very
worried
good
about his
arm.
arm strength, but he doesn't have like
Yeah.
a Will Levis or an Anthony Richardson arm.
Yeah.
But when you're as good as he is at his age, like to be as polished as he is as a college quarterback at reading and manipulating defenses, and
Hmm.
then to also have the pocket presence and the ability to create something, I I'm all in. I'm all in on
Yeah.
Bryce Young.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that I definitely think there are times where he maybe hero balls a little bit too much. Which, dude, you're gonna say that about any quarterback coming out of college that is going to be, looked at in this territory.
I would even say
So
that like Patrick Mahomes had that problem in the NFL 2 years ago.
yeah,
Like
like
the overconfident in the ability to create.
we just saw that this year with Josh Allen. That part is a process that quarterbacks of this talent level need to work through. Um, and I'm not saying like he's a finished product in terms of reading defenses and all that other stuff. Um, but he's displayed a skill level in all the areas that he really needs to have them that is high enough that he can come in and start day one and not be terrible. And that is really all you're asking for out of a rookie quarterback starting day one.
That's good. We're on the same page. I thought this was going to be more of an argument, but uh, I'm going to ask this knowing the answer to the question. But who is your number two quarterback?
It is Anthony Richardson.
Oh, shocked Pikachu face.
I know that there is a narrative on Anthony Richardson, and a lot of that narrative is comes down to he had God, was it Utah that they played early?
Yes.
Yeah, that play against Utah that was just absolutely insane. That like had social media go wild, and I started playing SEC teams and kind of had some struggles a little bit.
The play in the
And
game against Utah where I text you as soon as the game was over and I was like, this is
yeah,
my guy. I was like,
yep,
I'm all in on Anthony Richardson.
yeah. So the narrative then shifted later to that like, okay, he can make flashy plays, but like he doesn't really know how to play quarterback because he struggled. But you need to watch Anthony Richardson's tape in a chronological order. You need to watch him from early season and see how he was playing, and then watch him through the end of the season because though like it's totally different level of football. And what we saw from Anthony Richardson was improvement in his pocket presence, which is like honestly in this draft, I guess amongst these four, we'll say, behind Bryce Young, like he's the best with his pocket presence, I would say. Maybe not as consistent as I would like to see, but then you add in the fact that like how quick he is with his feet and his ability to like explode and create space for himself. It's exactly like that's what you're dreaming of out of a quarterback. And then he plays with a lot more anticipation as a passer than people give him credit for. That there are, and I want to see a lot more of it, but it's there in just about every game where you see him rip a throw before his receiver is out of the break. Like that is something Justin Fields never did. And people wanted him drafted like 1 or 2. He made a lot of strides as the season went on. And then you kind of look at the way he plays in the quarterback run game. And it's like, yeah, it would be great for him to sit for a year. Like that would be great. If you can't do that, if you run an offense that is catered to the quarterback run game and heavily relies on the run game in general and utilizes that to set up passes that are to his strengths, he can play. He can play this year. Suddenly those concerns about, well, he's not ready, he's too raw. Well, that's not nearly as big of a deal now.
Yeah, so you want to see him more in a system like what Philly runs with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, or I mean, I think a lot of these systems are a lot closer than a lot of people realize. I mean, obviously, San Francisco could definitely very quickly adapt their system to be something that works perfectly for him, right? Detroit is another example that like they already rely heavily on the run. You're only making a couple of changes to get the quarterback run game mixed into it. And I mean, there you go. Like that's it. There's a lot of offenses in the NFL that do value the run game, and you're only changing a couple of things to get the quarterback involved in it.
Yeah, so I have Anthony Richardson as my number 2 quarterback as well. What I will say about him is that I think he has the highest ceiling, not only for quarterbacks in this draft, but he might have the highest ceiling of any player in this draft. It's just a matter of if he can get there or how close he can get. He's the most impressive physical specimen we've ever seen at quarterback.
Yeah.
Honestly, he's 6'4", 244 and runs a 4.43.
Yeah.
And threw a ball 85 yards in the air.
Yeah.
His pro day. 85 yards in the air. You don't do that.
Yeah.
And I know that people may say, well, Jamarcus Russell threw 170. But like, yeah, exactly. That's why he was in the top 3. Yeah, but that's why Jamarcus Russell was like a top 3 pick. And same issues with Jamarcus Russell.
Maybe he would have been good if he could throw at 85.
Well, he would have been good if he watched film or cared about being good at all.
Tried not to be 300 pounds.
Yeah, there's a lot of things he could have done to be better.
Another thing that I will add for Richardson too is when I watched film on him too, I continued to be struck by thoughts of like, okay, well, why is this play drawn up this way? Why is this receiver running this route this way? Why is this receiver knowing they're the check down here in a situation where they're trying to get into field goal position to win this game, running out of bounds as they're catching the ball? Like, there's a very clear lack of attention to detail for the entire offense, which strikes me as poor coaching. And I mean, this is his first season starting, like full season starting. for him to be where he's at in an environment like that tells me that there's a lot of development that can still be had there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that he should have gone back to school for another year to develop.
I don't know
I,
how much you're going to develop there.
yeah,
And he might be aware of that.
I'm the opposite way. I'm like, I think the ideal situation for him. I know you made the case that he could potentially play this year.
Yeah.
I think the best situation for him is to go somewhere like Detroit,
Yeah.
where you can ride the bench for a year or 2 years and develop and get that coaching that you need, because he does. I mean, we've talked about all the good things with him, the, you know, rocket launcher arm, the athleticism, the maybe he's a little bit better at some areas of the game than people think he is. But I mean, from like a footwork and um, pocket presence and mechanics, like a lot of the things that you need to be an NFL quarterback, he still has development that's needed, which is
Yeah.
why, with his ceiling being so high, that's why I'm saying like he has the highest ceiling. You know, it's you're going to hear
Mm-hmm.
a lot of comparisons to Josh Allen when Josh Allen came out and like
Yeah.
needed time to develop. But honestly, Josh Allen was probably further ahead than where Anthony Richardson is right now, because he's so raw and he flashes all the things you want to see flash, which is
Yep.
why he's up so high. But he needs time
Yeah.
to refine a lot of his skills. And like
Yeah.
he's the proverbial, like, I don't actually think he's 4 years away, but he's the proverbial like 2 years away from being 2 years away guy.
Yeah.
Um, so if he could sit behind Goff for like a year, 2 years,
Yeah.
I think that's the best situation for him, but I don't think it's the
I
only way
agree.
that he succeeds.
No. And I know that there's a lot of the people who are down on Richardson. The thing they like to throw out is like, oh, the accuracy. And I'm like, okay, well, 90% of the people who are saying the accuracy also don't know what good footwork looks like. And if you watch him play, like his footwork is bad. That kind of goes hand in hand with the lack of attention to detail that you see from that entire offense. And I think if you can get him with good, consistent footwork that matches what the offense is trying to do on that play, if you are supposed to have a specific type of drop back and your footwork does not match that, it's going to be real hard to get the throw off in good rhythm. Poor footwork can kind of give you this thing where like your eye level is going up and down and up and down. And if your guy's eye level is going up and down, you're trying to throw the ball 30 yards downfield, kind of hard to be accurate. So
Yeah,
I
it's tough.
think I think Josh Allen is like the reason why you shouldn't be worried about the accuracy for a guy that, yeah, like definitely has some big misses, but like then you look at what's happening on those big misses and it's like, oh, well, that thing that has a big impact on a person's ability to throw the ball that's coachable. Okay, yeah, that probably caused that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I just, any prospect where it's like his ceiling is more athletic Josh Allen,
Yeah.
like, oh my God. It's just a question of how close to that ceiling does he get? Can he get there? Can he get to
Yeah.
80% of that? Can he, but yeah, like the ceiling for him is more athletic Josh Allen or
Yeah.
more athletic Cam Newton.
Right.
The floor for
Yeah.
him is that he's a bust.
Right.
So that, we talk about like variance bands every
Yeah.
year. It's huge. It's the biggest one. And if you think he's going to be higher on that, then I grab him with a top 5 pick because he's that special. Let's go to quarterback number 3. Who do you have?
I got CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I have him at number 3
Yeah.
as well.
And look, the only reason CJ Stroud is even here for me is because he's the safe pick. Like, yes, I have little doubt that he will be able to put up reasonable stats and performance on field as a quarterback to like look competent. My comp for him is like basically Dak Prescott, or like I would say a less, I don't know, like some sort of variation of Jared Goff. I do not like his pocket presence at all, which is where a lot of the Dak Prescott and the Jared Goff comes in. You see when he's really under pressure, you see him bail out backwards a lot, which is like the exact opposite of what you want to do when you're under pressure, because a 10-yard sack is kind of a problem.
I I want to like CJ Stroud as a
He
prospect.
makes it really hard.
The positives first. I I like productive college players
Yeah,
in the
he's
draft.
accurate.
Yeah,
He plays on schedule.
I don't think you have to be productive to be a good NFL player. Like I don't think you have to have good college production, but I when we get to the guys I like podcast, it'll almost all be guys that were productive in college. Like that's
Yeah.
my MO every year on this podcast is that's a big
Mm-hmm.
thing I look for, except for like Tariq Woolen, who I threw out last year because I was just
Yeah.
beside myself with the athleticism and the size. So I awesome college production. I mean, you can argue, he's surrounded by 5 first round draft picks at receiver, his 2 years as a starter. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But good college production. He played his best in the biggest games that they played. He was awesome against Georgia in the
Yeah.
playoffs this year, 348 yards and 4 touchdowns. He,
I was genuinely impressed with that. He
yeah,
played very, very well in that game.
yes. He was good in that game. He actually was not that bad in the 2 Michigan games that they got killed in.
Yeah.
And then the Rose Bowl, he was awesome in the Rose Bowl in large part because of JSN. But
Mm-hmm.
I, the thing, like, so I want to like him. I see the concerns that you have with him on tape as well. The pocket presence
Mm-hmm.
is really bad, but he doesn't have the same concerns that you typically have with Ohio State quarterbacks
No,
on film, where
no.
he processes pretty good. He's got an accurate arm when he
Yeah.
does, but like he bails out of clean pockets. I don't love
Mm-hmm.
that. And so there's some issues there for sure that you mentioned.
Yeah. And when you're talking about a quarterback that plays for a team that like traditionally has great offensive lines and is bailing out of clean pockets, when I imagine how that's going to translate to the NFL, when you might be going to Carolina, which is not going to have super clean pockets all the time. Uh, I don't think that goes over very well.
My big issue with CJ Stroud is not on the field.
Yep.
It's off the field. I The best way I can describe it is that I feel like he is playing the role of the leader that he thinks that he's supposed to play, but it's not really who he is. So I think back to like the Heisman ceremony where Desmond Howard was kind of teasing him with like the Aiden Hutchinson stuff. And he has this like fake tough guy, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we're going to come back and we're going to kick Michigan's asses next year and we're going to do this whole thing. It falls flat to me with him. And it all seems like fake and staged, and that he's like
Yeah.
saying the things that he thinks he's supposed to say to make him look good. Um, and it's like one of those things where like you look at someone like Bryce Young and it's like work in silence and let your success speak for itself.
Yeah.
And to me, CJ Stroud seems like a dog who's got a lot of bark and not a ton of bite.
There's evidence to this. Like there is on field, well, technically not on field, but like on camera during game day evidence to this. When Ohio State has gotten punched in the mouth, you can see in games where he does the Aaron Rodgers special, where instead of like rallying his teammates or doing whatever he needs to do to get everyone on the same page so they can get things turned around and like get some points put up on the board, you see him sitting by himself on the bench by his lonesome. He is not a leader at all. I have a hard time seeing that being something that changes. Like that just it traditionally just doesn't happen.
Yeah, so that bothers me. We're on the same page there. The only other thing I had written down for him under the negatives is that he has good athleticism, but I feel like he's worse when he uses it. If that makes sense. Like he is less accurate when he's rolling out. He's less accurate on the run. He's less accurate when he scrambles. Um, he like bails out of clean pockets, like I said, because he's going to try to
Yeah.
take off. It's like for some reason he's worse when he uses the good athleticism that he has,
Yeah.
and I don't. That's not
Yeah.
something I like.
It's interesting because you're right. He does have the athletic ability, but he's not a scrambler. That's not how he wants to play, which is fine. It's fine that you want to be a pocket passer. It's actually one of the things that I like about his game. But he also has not spent a lot of time developing that skill set. Who knows? Maybe over time he can develop that in the NFL if he like really puts his mind to it. But have we seen evidence that like he's got that dog in him that he's going to go grind that out? We kind of just talked about that. Like he likes to talk, but I think the ones that talk are usually doing less work than the ones that don't say much at all.
Yeah, yep, that's exactly where I was going with Bryce
With
Young.
with the exception of wide receivers and cornerbacks, I will say that is a totally separate discussion.
Yes. Um, I actually think it would be better for CJ if he falls down the board a little bit instead of going number one.
Yeah.
I feel like number one, he's gonna have that like arrogant, like, oh, I'm the best player. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to put in all this work. I want to put a chip on his shoulder. I want him to go
Yeah.
after Richardson for him to be better.
Yeah.
But so quarterback number 4, I have Will Levis just because we said that these are the 4
Yeah.
quarterbacks we're gonna do. At this point, I think I might take Hendon Hooker over Will Levis in the
They're kind
draft.
of neck and neck for me.
I don't like Will Levis. I don't know. How do you feel about him?
So I alluded to it earlier that Will Levis is very peculiar for me in terms of evaluating him. And I say that because he played much better a year ago. I watch his film this year, and there's a lot of things that are working against him that are not his fault. I mean, the offensive structure, the lack of talent on the outside or at offensive line in front of him, uh, the fact that he was playing through like I think it was like hand, foot, and ankle injuries pretty much the entire season. And it's like the only thing I can take out of this season is that you're tough as shit. Like that and your arm is still an absolute fucking bazooka. There's just it's hard to watch this past season and not have concerns about obviously the accuracy, but I think he's got some of the same footwork issues that we talked about with Richardson that can be resolved. I think he's shown the ability to process what happens like on the field in front of him, but I don't see him do it as much as I want to see it. Where do you go with any of this? Because you don't want to say like, okay, well, a lot of this was the injury, a lot of this was the situation that he was in, and then he's healthy, and you got him in camp, and then you realize 80% of those problems are still there.
Yeah, I feel like there are two outcomes for Will Levis in the NFL. Either one, he's Zach Wilson, and he's someone that flew up our boards because he has a strong arm and he can make some
Yeah.
big throws. Or two, he's Justin Herbert, and the entire draft community is just wrong on this guy, just like everyone was wrong on Herbert, and that he's got a great arm and he ends up being a super productive NFL quarterback. I almost feel like there's no in between for him.
We also want to keep in mind that this is a guy that couldn't win the job at Penn State.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing that bothers me about him the most is he does the 2 years at Penn State. He can't win the job, so he transfers to Kentucky.
Yeah.
He starts 2 years at Kentucky and has 14 starts in the SEC.
Yeah.
Out of his 14 SEC starts, would you care to guess how many times he threw for more than 300 yards?
2.
You're close. It's 1. He threw for 300 yards one time, and it was last year against Tennessee, who had an absolutely abysmal pass defense last year.
Right.
The thing that bugs me is like, so he has one game of over 300 yards against the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at his game log, all of his really good games from his 2 years at Kentucky, so even going back to last year when he was better, it's Louisiana Monroe, New Mexico State, Miami, Ohio, Youngstown State. Those are the games where he's throwing for 340, 360, 400 and multiple touchdowns. And almost every single SEC game, whether it's against Vanderbilt or Georgia, it's like 100 yards, a touchdown, a pick, 200 yards, a touchdown, 2 picks. He also, like, I know he was hurt, but his junior year, he ran for 400 yards and 9 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
His senior year, he ran for negative 107 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah. So, like, was he that hurt?
It was
this
pretty
past
bad.
year? Like, that, I mean, it's bad, but man.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you're talking about like foot and ankle, like,
yeah, it's just,
I don't know how much you can do with that.
It's just like you said, though. It's like, we're going to make all these excuses for him and be like, well, he was hurt and he doesn't have a great supporting cast. And then,
and my main concern is that he couldn't beat Sean Clifford for a job. Like it's not what he did this year. It's you couldn't beat that guy because he's bad.
I don't know. I'm down on Levis. I think at this point I would take Hooker over him. The concern with Hooker is that he's 25 and just tore his ACL. So
that's not my concern. You look at the offense he plays in, none of that fucking transfers to the NFL. None of it. How ready are you to come in? And I get that, like, he's probably not going to play much his first year because of the injury.
This is the problem, though, is like he may not get much time the first year because of the injury, and then like he has a lot to learn, but he's extremely talented. You could see the big throws, the accuracy, the stuff like that.
Well, and I think like mentally I would say he's because he is older, he's mature enough to be able to make that transition mentally more quickly than some of these other guys, just because of like the natural like rate at which a human brain progresses.
Mm-hmm. But by the time that he's healthy and up to speed and ready to start an NFL game, is he 28 years old? Like, that's way too far down the road.
Yeah, I mean 26, but that's still only like what, a year and a half younger than Jared Goff.
He's just old with his old balls. What's his 5-year plan?
Old man balls.
What's his 5-year plan? Don't die. No, I actually I don't know. So I'm out on Levis. But I feel like the fact that I'm out on Levis is what's going to make him the next Justin Herbert. It's
absolutely.
All of us are going to be like, yeah, he's like 4th in the first round. We don't really love him. And then he goes before Richardson and Stroud. And we're all just like, oof, like, man, can't That sucks. Too bad they didn't draft Richardson, and then he's Justin Herbert too, and we're all just like, God damn it.
There's so much talent there though. Like when he is healthy, like you were saying, he can move. He can, put up a few hundred yards and score a bunch of touchdowns with his feet. The big arm, like I don't want him in the top 10, don't get me wrong, but I mean, if you are sitting there and evaluating between these two guys, like, well, I put out I think it was last week, a tweet basically saying that like anytime you draft a quarterback, it's a boom or bust move if you're drafting them to potentially be your franchise quarterback. Like you either hit as someone who you believe can make you a contender perennially because you have them on your roster, or you don't get that guy and you are stuck in no man's land, and that is bust. Like
Yeah.
getting a Dak Prescott is a failure to me in terms of drafting a quarterback because if you build the perfect team around a very mid quarterback, you can win a championship, right? The whole point of roster building is not to like, hey, let's build this incredible team so that we can have a chance at maybe winning one. Like you want to have a chance every year.
Rams fans, don't listen to Matt. Your championship is great. You just celebrate that. Matt's a harsh critic, man. If you win one championship, you're a failure. You got to compete for more. I get what you're saying. You
No,
want to
yeah,
be
like
like in
most
the
of the time,
yeah.
like if if you win one, you had a chance multiple years, right? I mean, the Rams had a chance. Was it what 2019?
They had a chance
What the year they played the
before.
Pats?
Yeah, they had
Yeah,
chance might be generous.
yeah,
With
they
how
were
bad they were
there.
in that game. They made it.
Yeah,
They shouldn't have, but they did. I get what you're saying is you want to be like a perennial contender and be in the spot
yeah,
to compete for a Super Bowl every year because the chances of actually winning one are so low
yeah,
that like you need multiple shots at it. You'd rather be like
yeah.
Cincinnati, who's always in the final four, than
Yep,
the Cowboys who never
yeah,
make the final four.
right. But if your plan is like, all right, I got Dak Prescott or Kirk Cousins, and like we're just gonna build the strongest roster we can so that one year he might be good enough that we actually get it done. Like, okay, well, like maybe it can happen, but is it going to happen? Probably not.
We're on the same page. Bryce Young, Richardson, Stroud, and then Levis as that's how we would rank those top four. Let's hit a couple other questions real quick before we sign off here.
Yeah.
Um, so last year, we saw astronomical amounts of money and draft capital spent on the wide receiver position.
Mm-hmm.
There were trades that involved multiple picks. There was hundreds of millions of dollars spent. There was also 13 wide receivers drafted in the first two rounds of the NFL draft. This year, the wide receiver class is a little
It's not good. I'll say it.
it's not as hyped up for sure. There's not as much
Yeah.
top end talent. There's
Yeah.
not as much depth. I'm not going to give away anything for the players we like podcast, but there is a wide receiver in this class who I feel like is going to be an absolute stud.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think happens with the wide receiver class in this draft? Do you think we just don't see that many guys drafted in the first couple rounds, or
I would, yeah. That's what I foresee happening. I think you might see more guys start to come off the board in the second round, but like I think rounds like 3 and 4 is really where you kind of hit your sweet spot on value with these guys. Because there are a bunch of guys that like can be your third, fourth wide receiver. And like I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but like you need those guys. Like if you don't have those guys, you're not going far. Like because shit happens and you need guys that are capable to step up. So, um, but you're not going to get your Jamar Chase this year. Like it's like that. That isn't there. They you might there are guys that might still blow up and turn out to be a star, but like the top end talent is just not there. It's more base heavy this year.
Yeah, I'm going to say that I don't agree with you. And I think there is a wide receiver in this class who could be an absolute stud. Well, it's a
Okay, but they're not coming
teaser for
in
next week.
as like the headliner.
No, I was going to say it's more of like a
Yeah.
Justin Jefferson, like, Justin Jefferson was
Yeah.
drafted in the 20s and then was an absolute stud right away.
Right. Like,
It's not like
I
a
mean,
Jamar Chase or like a guy who's going to be like a top 7 pick.
yeah, I mean, you're talking more like Amon Ra was like slept on a little bit and blew up.
Amon Ra was slept on a lot, and I said that before
Yes.
that draft.
Yeah.
I
Well,
I am
I thought he was at worst a third round guy.
Yeah, he ended up going in the fifth,
Uh, I think like
fourth or
I
fifth
think it
or
was
something.
fourth. I think it was fourth.
Yeah, he was on my list of players I like. And when
Yeah,
we do our
because
list of players that I like next week, I will talk to you about who the receiver that I love is. But um, my prediction for the wide receivers in this draft is that we're going to see guys get overdrafted.
yeah,
I look at like there are some interesting prospects in like the second, third round range who I think get pushed up into the second because of the NFL's fascination with receivers. Guys like
yeah.
Cedric Tillman, Josh Downs, Jalen Hyatt, Keyshawn Butte. I think there are some interesting prospects.
So my only reason I don't entirely disagree with you, but I don't think it's going to be very dramatic, is that this is such a good year for cornerbacks that okay, well, what's the best way to counteract teams loading up on wide receivers? Get guys who can potentially cover them. And you can never have enough cornerbacks. Like, good God, those guys drop like flies.
Yeah, I mean more like I think it's going to be one of those things where it's like the over under. The over under is not out yet on FanDuel,
Yeah.
but it's going to be like the over under for receivers drafted in the first round is 4.5. And we're going to count and we're going to be like, okay, JSN, Johnston, Addison, and Flowers,
Yeah.
right? That's 4. And people won't expect a fifth, but then like you'll have a fifth. It'll be like Josh Downs at 30
Okay.
or something like that. And then in the second round, it'll be like, okay, we're expecting to have it's like over under 6.5 wide receivers in the
I
first
see
two
what you're
rounds.
saying.
And
Okay.
it's like 8 instead of 6. I don't think it's going to be like 13 like it was last year. It's just
No.
not that
Yeah,
type of
it's
class.
gonna slow down a lot.
It will, but I do think that like we'll be like, oh yeah, it's going to be 6 in the first two rounds, and it'll end up being 8, and people will be shocked by how high some guys go. Like I think someone
Yeah.
like Bryce Ford Wheaton could end up like going in the third, and people are going to be like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. I I still think that the corner class is just so strong that I think it's gonna put a lot of these teams that are thinking about that in a position where they're kind of going back and forth between those two positions. And I mean, who can fucking predict what these insane people are gonna do?
Yeah. I don't love Ford Wheaton. I'm just gonna say like he's not gonna be on my list of players I like next week, but I'm just gonna say he's 6'4" and runs like a 4.3.
Yeah.
And he's like if you watch his film, he's really good at jump balls. And I'm telling you, someone's gonna see that and he's gonna go in like the second or third round.
It's gonna be
because
like
it's just,
faster Kenny Galladay.
yeah, exactly. Um,
Use him up for about 3, 4 years until his body's destroyed, and then let the Giants give him a giant contract.
Yep. He actually like I'm getting way off topic here, but Ford Wheaton was actually on my list of players I wanted to watch more of this season
Mm-hmm.
because I watched the backyard brawl at the beginning of the season. I think he had like 3 catches for 100 something and he was winning these big jump balls. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh man, I was like, I kind of like this guy. And then I watched his film throughout the rest of the season and I was like, I'm okay. So uh
I think I'm done now. Two
the
minutes in.
the next big question, Bijan Robinson, the running
Yeah.
back from Texas, is seen as a generational prospect at the running back position by some. He's unquestionably the best running back prospect we've had since Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
Where do you feel comfortable drafting him? Because,
Second round.
yeah. Okay.
Second round.
I was going to say, if you listen to the show, you know that we're both just like vehemently, we are not going to draft running backs in the
Yeah.
first round, but
And
he's so good
yeah,
that you do have to think about it.
like round two, pick one, absolutely the pick. 100%. Like, not even thinking about it. But like, if I'm sitting there at pick 18, like, yeah, sure. Bijan Robinson makes a lot of sense. But if I also got Keontae Banks sitting there, can I get 85 to 90% of Deontay? Can I get 85 to 90% of Deontay Banks in the third or fourth round? No, not at all. As good as this corner class is, like, you're not getting that. You can get that at running back because this is an incredible running back draft beyond Bijan Robinson. Yeah, like, you might miss out on him if you don't take him in the first round, but also not out of the realm of possibility that you can draft someone 2 to 3 rounds later that might end up having a better career than him.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I'm going to steal your line and say two things can be true, that he can be, and I think he will be incredible next
Yep.
year. He's an extremely good player.
Yep.
He can have, 1,500 total yards and 13 touchdowns as a rookie. He could be a fantasy stud. He can be all of these things, and it cannot matter.
Yeah.
I look at the Super Bowl this past year. It was Kansas City and Philly. Kansas City was running out Pacheco, who was a 6th-round pick last year.
Mm-hmm.
Philly, they, besides the fact that they hate their best running back or hated, and now he's gone. Thank God for Miles Sanders.
Yeah, now he can be hated elsewhere.
They were running back by committee. Look at like the Super Bowl before that. It's Rams, Bengals. You can keep going back. The Patriots never really had great running backs aside from the year they traded for Corey Dillon. And now they have Ramondre, who was a 4th-round pick. And then I look at like the highly drafted running backs. You look at the Zeke Elliott's and the
Yeah.
Christian McCaffreys and the Saquon Barkleys. And for as great as they are, they've never achieved anything.
Yeah.
They've had, Christian McCaffrey had one of the greatest running back seasons that we've ever seen. 1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yards receiving, all these touchdowns. It didn't even make the fucking playoffs. The only highly drafted running back who's won anything recently was Leonard Fournette. And he didn't even win on the team that drafted him. He won on the team that got him for free.
Mm-hmm.
After he got cut from the team that spent a 4th overall pick on him.
Yeah.
So I am vehemently against drafting running backs in the top 10. I don't like drafting them in the first round. You look at like guys like Najee and ETN, and it's like, I won't do the whole list because then we'll be here all night. But like, you can go through. There are so many running backs, so many great running backs who were drafted in later rounds. Kamara, and I mentioned Ramondre Stevenson, who just put up 1,600 yards in the Patriots offense, 4th-round pick. Like, you
Yeah.
can wait. You can wait. You could take like a Tajay
I
Spears
want to
or like
say
oh,
Aaron Jones was a fourth round pick too.
Aaron Jones is a late pick. The Derrick Henry's a second round pick.
Yeah.
Like,
Montgomery, I believe, was a late guy as well. Uh,
yep.
by the way, I would fucking kill to have Aaron Jones in my backfield. Like,
But it's like you said, you can wait and you can take a Jamar Gibbs or Dwayne McBride,
yeah.
a Kendre Miller, Tajay Spears. There's all these
Hmm.
really good guys who you can get in the third, fourth round
Yeah.
this year and get a good prospect
Yeah.
at a more important position in the first. So
Yep. That being said, he is absolutely going to the Washington Commanders. 100%.
in
That
the
like
first round.
lock that in.
Uh, the last question we'll answer quickly before we sign off. Intangibles come up a lot this time of
Yeah.
year. Um,
Clint's favorite thing.
yeah, that Clint was like, fuck intangibles. They're not real. Do, do you believe in intangibles as part of like the draft evaluation process?
They are a real thing, but when like I what I believe Clint was referring to is the media pundits that just throw out intangibles as like this blanket term, which I realize we are doing right now. But uh if you are a scout or an NFL GM, like there are specific things that you are looking for that do fall under the umbrella of intangibles. Uh, One of those big things is like the Lions front office openly talks about it all the time is like football integrity. Are you going to grind it out in the film room? Are you going to grind it out in the weight room? Are you going to go at it rep after rep in practice and in OTAs to like really fine tune your craft and understand what your responsibilities are so that you are always where you need to be? Like those things are incredibly important. And you also like need to show that you're not a liability for the rest of your team. That is something that, like, I mean, if we're going to talk intangibles, we got to talk Jalen Carter right now. I want to preface this by saying, obviously, since neither one of us has had a chance to talk to Jalen Carter, we can't say anything that we know for sure. But from the outside looking in, what we see is the kid made a mistake being where he was, being involved in what he was in. I am willing to admit that is a mistake, and his mistakes can be forgiven. He then made an active choice to lie to police officers about what happened and made the active choice to walk away from what happened while two people that he was quite familiar with died and others he knew were injured. After all that came out on the first day of the combine, he showed up several days later to his pro day, like what, 9 pounds heavier than he had been at the combine. There's a lot of concerns there. Uh, there's concerns about you being a distraction to your team, obviously, but also concerns about your ability to keep yourself available for your team. Because if you're not available because you're making reckless decisions, how valuable is your skill set, anyways? Then it can't be very valuable.
Yeah. I I agree with you. I think intangibles are important from like an off-field perspective.
Yep.
I think about it from an on-field perspective as well. And I think about
Yeah.
like someone like Aaron Rodgers, the all the
Yeah.
talent in the world, not a good leader.
Nope.
The guys in the locker room don't love him. He's
Yeah.
not the guy you want in big situations.
Mm-hmm.
all of those things are hard to quantify. And like he's super, he's always been a super talented dude. And it's like he actually, I would argue, underachieved in his career for the amount of talent he had. And it's because the
Yeah.
intangible stuff's not there. And then you have
Yeah.
someone like Tom Brady, who is the greatest quarterback of all time, predominantly based on things that are intangible.
Yeah. Not
So,
nearly as talented as Aaron Rodgers.
right. So,
Yeah.
it's
And
just hard to quantify in the draft
yeah.
process because I feel like sometimes with some of these guys, you
Yeah.
don't know until they're in your building.
Right. The other aspect of this too is we we have so many people talking about Jalen Carter as a prospect, like outside of the intangibles, as a generational talent. I am willing to admit that there are things that you will overlook for a generational talent because what they could potentially bring you if you can get it all to go the right way is overwhelmingly powerful. Jalen Carter is not a generational talent. He's not. It's not close. I put out a tweet earlier today comparing his productivity in college to other defensive tackles that are certainly considered generational talents. It's bad. So he has 35 career games at Georgia, 6 total career sacks there. And Ndamukong Suh had 19 and a half sacks in his last 27 games. Aaron Donald had 26 and a half sacks in his last 26 games. Even Gerald McCoy put up 12 and a half in his last 27 games. And we can sit here and say, oh, well, like, he needs to be refined more. And you know what? Like, no. Knowing how to get to the quarterback and finish off a sack is one of those things that's really honestly just hard to teach.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a generational prospect because we're not sitting here having a Jalen Carter versus Bryce Young discussion.
Yeah.
Like generational means that you are like independent of position. You're
Yeah.
going to be the first overall pick in the draft.
Right.
You're that good. You are that special, even if you're like a corner or an edge rusher or like a safety or something.
Yeah.
Generational is like you're going to be one of the best players at that position of all time.
Yeah.
So
With him, my mind just continually goes back to look, when your team is in a rough spot and like you guys really need to pull together, is the guy that everyone knows walked away from 2 of his friends while they were dead or dying the guy that they're going to be like really trust and rally around? Because if you're drafting a guy that early, you probably want him to be somewhat of a leader on your defense.
yep. You can't know, and that is why it is, as they say, intangible. But
Yeah.
that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on
Yep.
Spotify, Apple Podcast, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Twitter at Fouled Out Sports. You can find Matt on Twitter at Matador_defense. And you can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. We will be back next week with NFL Draft Podcast number 2.
Electric
Players
Boogaloo.
Boogaloo, yeah. We should just leave. That should just be the name of the podcast.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be players that we like, which is probably my favorite podcast of the year. Yeah. To be honest, it's up there. It's like one of my top 5 favorite podcasts we do every year. Matt and I will both break down 3 players in detail that we really like in this draft, and then so we will also have 3 quick hitters for you guys too. So a total of 12 prospects that we like. It's a segment that's featured numerous NFL stars. I'll have to bring all the names next week.
Yeah.
Javonte Williams, Javon Holland, Chris Olave. It's a good episode, and we've had very good results with it
Yeah.
every season. If you look at like the guys we picked in the episode versus how they performed their rookie season or their sophomore season, very strong results from that podcast. So I'm looking forward to doing it again and breaking down the guys in this draft class. Matt, you got any final thoughts before we sign off?
So very, very glad that draft season is truly here and upon us in full swing, and really weeks away from its climax. So
The best part about draft season for me is that it gives me something to do besides watching the Red Sox because they
yeah.
are bad. They are a bad baseball team. So, all right, my friend, I will talk to you soon. We will see you guys next week for prospects that we like.
Yep. Later,
All
guys.
right. Bye, guys. Bye,
Bye.
Mom.